Hello everybody and welcome to the BIA Brexit webinar of the 10th of December 2020. Those of you who've been on this journey with us for a while will know that we've been doing this month in, month out since the referendum, and that's about 4 years now. It's me and Tim today, and in that time, of course, within a quarter of that time, the life science industry has been able to discover, develop, manufacture, regulate and distribute a COVID vaccine, and I believe that process has started effectively in the UK. Unfortunately, I can't bring you that much progress on Brexit. You'll have seen that there's been no big breakthrough overnight, and we're still in the corridor of uncertainty. So from me, a couple of messages, and I'm going to hand over to Tim to take you through the details. So where are we on the 10th of December? Well, I think you've got to get as ready as you can for a no-deal Brexit. We've talked about this in previous webinars. I know the challenge of the paperwork, I know the challenge of the logistics, I know the challenge of the ferry routes. The information is available on the BIA website. We can also get you linked into the Government's Exchange website, which has got some more detail if you want to talk to Tim about how to get access to that. And there's the gov.uk website. And of course, there's the previous webinars where we've had the excellent civil servants who are able to take you through what you can do for no deal from a UK perspective. And they're still available to view on our YouTube channel. Secondly, I'm aware, as you are aware, that there are still areas of uncertainty and areas where there are lack of clarity, and those still remain. So we're as ready as we can be, but you can't be ready for things that you don't know about, and there are still big areas of uncertainty that aren't cleared up. So my ask for you on this one is we have one more meeting with ministers next week in the diary. If there are areas of uncertainty that are particularly poignant or potent to you, particular points of detail, please tell us what they are, and we will raise them on the UK side with UK ministers. So yes, we can't solve all things, but we know there are uncertainties. Which ones do you really care about? Make sure that we tell them to us so we can raise them. Our position remains the same. Third point, get a deal done. Get an MRA. There are benefits to patients in the UK and the EU of continued close cooperation and a deal that enables the life science sector to progress this part of the world. It's a globally competitive sector. Things that enable business to work freely are best for our sector, and we don't resolve from that position. We remain of that position. Get a deal done. Finally, I'll be highlighting a couple of specific areas where continued close cooperation in the present context might be helpful, and I would encourage the UK side to use these in the 11th hour negotiations. Firstly, the MHRA is going to have the best data, best pharmacovigilance data on the actual real-life practice of the COVID vaccine in a population. It also has the yellow card system. We're in a great position to be able to share that knowledge and that information to enable the best scientific decision with our European partners. The MHRA should be allowed to share that, and the government and the Commission should enable that discussion to happen at a technical level with the European Medicines Agency. Secondly, we've seen a sophisticated cyber attack on the European Medicines Agency in the last 24 hours reported by the European Medicines Agency. If for any reason any of the processes or systems of the EMA are disabled or compromised as a result of that, then the UK should let the National Cybersecurity Centre experts who've been working in this area with companies and with the UK organisations provide whatever expertise they can to help on that area. And if the EMA is in a particularly difficult position, is there anything the MHRA can do in terms of its systems, personnel or people to help? So I think what I'm going to do is keep it practical, show the benefits of getting a deal done, and encourage everybody to get a deal done. But I'll hand over now to Tim to take us through where we're at.
Brilliant. And yeah, like Steve said, we haven't perhaps got as detailed an update for you because not as much has really happened over the last couple of weeks, but there has been some guidance published in the last hour, which we've been furiously making sure we covered as much as we can in this presentation on no deal guidance from the EU. But the first thing we're going to kick off with is our customary audience poll. Do you think the UK and the EU would agree a free trade agreement before the 31st of December 2020? So we're launching the poll now. Please do respond. I think last time we had around 55%.
Don't show the result from last time, Tim. Just to say, you know, because you'll lead the witness. I think it's like strictly, once they get to favourites, you never know how it's going to go. But we have been running this poll for several months, and it will be interesting to see where people are are today on this, because as always, the polling, it's not particularly scientific, but at least we're getting a trend analysis amongst our community.
So just give it another few seconds for anyone else who still wants to vote. And we're closing the poll now and sharing the results. So you can see a roughly 2/3 split there. I think, as I was saying, I think about 2 weeks ago, 55% of people suggested they felt we would get a deal. So despite there not perhaps being a lot of guidance issued in the last couple of weeks, there obviously has been a lot of movement in people's perception of how likely a deal is.
As ever, always useful and always useful to see where people are at. Thank you, everybody.
So now launching into the main presentation proper. If you do have any questions, please post them up as we go, and we'll be able to see them, and we'll answer them as we go if we can, but there'll also be time for questions at the end. So firstly, focusing on the good news, you might have seen this announcement on Tuesday from the Withdrawal Agreement Joint Committee. This is the committee that's led by Michael Gove, you can see there on the left, and Maroš Šefčovič, who's the EU Commission Vice President on the EU side. So the withdrawal agreement was the oven-ready deal that was agreed last year, and regardless of whether we get a free trade deal with the EU or not, the withdrawal agreement will come into effect, and it includes the Northern Ireland Protocol, and it's part of that is designed to ensure there's no hard border on the island of Ireland. So this is really positive news. We're expecting more detail following Michael Gove's oral statement in Parliament yesterday, where he said the agreement will be approved officially at a joint committee in the coming days. That may be as early as today. But what's already been announced is that the UK will drop the contentious parts of the UK Internal Market Bill and similar provisions that might have been in the upcoming taxation bill. The provisions in those bills broke parts of the withdrawal agreement, and so broke international law. So we're not going to go into detail again on exactly what those are or how they work, but their removal is very positive to making this agreement work and to potentially agreeing a free trade deal. So like I said, we're still waiting for confirmation, but there have been leaks suggesting that there'll be a trusted trader scheme for up to 98% of goods flowing from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. We also understand that there is likely to be a derogation or this timed phased approach to elements of the agreement, and that would include medicines regulation. So we don't know for certain, but we are hopeful that the year's delay to the new medicines regulatory requirements in Northern Ireland will be confirmed. There had been a rumour that there would be a delay to the introduction of customs checks, but it doesn't look like this has been agreed. And again, we're still waiting for details. And you may not have seen, but in the Commons yesterday, Anthony Brown, the MP for South Cambridgeshire, asked a question specifically about the Northern Ireland Protocol and its impact on life sciences businesses. Michael Gove replied, "It will be the case that there are no impediments to the continued successful integration of that work. Obviously, customs checks will be necessary, and they definitely are impediments, but Michael Gove's tone was positive, so read into that what you will." I don't know if you've got any thoughts on that one, Steve.
Well, it's good that the question was raised, and I think you can see the clarity of the answer, or lack of clarity.
So moving on, linked to this, there was a bit of confusion last week. So on Friday, the 27th of November, the European Medicines Agency published this guidance, and it seemed to slightly contradict MHRA guidance by suggesting that companies would require a local representative for Northern Ireland who would need to either be based in Northern Ireland or the EEA. This guidance was taken down on Monday, the 30th of December, then reissued on Tuesday, the 1st of December, with an added caveat that all this guidance was only true as long as the current law stands and may be subject to change depending on what's in the withdrawal agreement or any trade deal. So I think we have yet to see exactly how the Northern Ireland Protocol and the withdrawal agreement detail may affect this, but if it does still stand, we're hoping that there'll be at least an extra year to prepare for this local person to come in, because this is the agreement or the announcement on the 5th of November that there would be this timed phased approach, and so it's particularly concerning that the EMA put this out at such short notice with no reference to the timed phased approach and the derogation. If this timed phased approach is confirmed, and as I say, it will give us more time to understand the exact regulatory requirements to move medicines into Northern Ireland, and time to prepare for them as well.
I mean, Tim, what is amazing is we are days away and there is this in and out, up and down on the websites, lack of, there's there's an agreement, but you then go looking for the actual detail of it, and it's very difficult to find. So I just, I feel for members, and I wish we could give you the clarity that you need, the legal certainty for which to stand on some of these points. And we realise that that's not there, but we continue to push, and that's why I always say be able to change for the bits where there is uncertainty, where there is certainty, where there's uncertainty, point them out to us, and we'll continue to raise them. And we know that this is an impossible position for you to operate in, but we're trying the best we can, and you can see that that there's quite a lot of moving parts here, to put it politely.
And I would also say that on this, I think there is a hope that there may be some flexibility, and that I've heard in certain corners that, why would the EU stop medicines getting into Northern Ireland? That it's not in their interests. But we're continuously pushing back and highlighting that if the laws and the legal rules and the regulatory rules contradict one another, then it puts companies in a particularly awkward position, and none of them will be easy and willing to break EU law while meeting UK law. So basically, the fact that there is contradictory guidance and the potential for contradictory legal requirements with weeks remaining and little time to prepare is particularly concerning. Moving on to the leveling playing field and governance. So given they're the final stumbling blocks, these three, and I know we've been talking about them for a little while, I thought it's worth just diving into them in a little more detail. So the leveling playing field and governance are interlinked. Governance refers to the enforceable restrictions, and level playing field refers to the state aid, and together they are enforceable restrictions on state aid. So there's a broad agreement on what are called non-regression clauses in any trade agreement, and this would ensure that neither the UK or the EU would fall below the existing standards that they have currently, for example, on working conditions or the environment. But there's disagreement over what we call ratchet clauses. So this is where if one party, for example, the EU, increases its standards after the end of transition, then the ratchet clause would be a mechanism to ensure that EU businesses are not at a disadvantage if the UK fails to improve its own standards to match the EU. The problem is that corrective measures, most likely to be tariffs, are asymmetric, because tariffs from the EU on the UK will hurt the UK more than tariffs from the UK on the EU, given that the EU is a bigger party. So what the EU wants is that companies have the right to challenge level playing field violations in UK courts. They want the right to rapid unilateral action to protect specific markets in the EU. And they want cross-retaliatory powers, so that, for example, if there's a brief in fishing, then the EU could retaliate by imposing sanctions on financial services. The UK's position, they suggest these measures are unprecedented. We haven't seen them in other trade agreements, but the EU counters that the UK is asking for unprecedented access to the EU, and the UK's proximity makes it a special case. The UK is also worried that this would lead to regulatory convergence by the back door, with fear of EU retaliatory tariffs forcing the UK to adhere to EU standards. And the UK objects to the use of these cross-retaliatory powers. Moving on to fishing. So fishing is worth about £784 million to the UK economy. For comparison, the pharmaceutical sector is worth over £30 billion. E-boats catch around 650 million euros worth of fish in British waters, which is around 43% of the total. So British boats catch around 57%. And there are three zones around coasts. So the first is 0 to 6 nautical miles, which countries have control over. The next is the 6 to 12 nautical mile zone. And the UK has suggested that E-boats shouldn't have access to this. Below 12 nautical miles is considered as inshore fishing, and it's where you get a lot of the types of fish that live in sort of rock pools or sort of langoustine and that kind of thing. And then the final zone is the 12 to 200 nautical mile zone, and the UK has offered 3 years of access to this zone, then annual negotiations, and this is where you see the larger boats and the trawlers and that kind of thing. But the UK wants to limit the EU's catch in this zone to 20% of its current total, which is about 130 million euros. The EU offer, on contrast, is 87% of the current catch, so it's a 13% reduction, which would reduce to about 565 million euros. And the EU is keen to link fishing to the wider agreement to allow for cross-retaliatory measures, which we've discussed the UK is opposed to. But I think all of this is further complicated by the different types of fish and fishing patterns. So different countries and cultures catch and eat different fish and value those stocks differently and like to fish in different locations, which means that when you're looking at this, it's not just as complicated, not as simple as just the quotas. But I think what this illustrates is how far apart the EU and the UK are on fishing rights, that 20% versus 87%, and also illustrate what a small part of the UK and the EU economy's fishing actually is. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on the size of the fishing market compared to the pharmaceutical market in the UK, Steve?
It's the difference between a sprat and a mackerel, isn't it? The fishing industry and the life sciences sector. But we understand. I don't know. We've seen the Prime Minister holding up vials recently, haven't we? Maybe we should get him holding up more vials and less crabs.
Absolutely. So the state of the current talks and sort of the last chance, basically. You've seen on Monday evening, Boris Johnson and Ursula von der Leyen had an hour-and-a-half conversation, and following that call, it was announced that Boris would be heading to Europe. I think we know that this is something that the UK had been asking for since at least October, a meeting of the two heads or the principal leaders. But the EU had always said that it wouldn't be appropriate to have that until further progress had been made on the trade negotiations. So you could view it as positive that this happened, that progress had been made apart from on those outstanding issues. But you could also take it that this is was seen as the only way to resolve those issues after weeks of going round in circles and failing to agree. In terms of the meeting itself, it took place last night over dinner, and I think there was a bit of speculation in the media about the fish that they ate at that dinner. It lasted for about 3 hours, and Ursula von der Leyen described it as lively. We understand there was little compromise on either side. I think we understand the UK is hoping that the lack of progress spooks EU nation states who are meeting at the EU Council today, and that might kickstart some compromise on the EU side. But both sides appear to have agreed that the deadline for Brexit talks is now this Sunday, the 13th of December, which is one day to the day since the 12th of December 2019 general election, which has a sort of neatness to it if the deadline isn't further delayed. And I think unless either side compromises or progress is actually made on the talks, then I think we can expect to have no deal confirmed by Monday, the 14th of December. In terms of sort of sovereignty, because I think everyone's been talking a little bit about this, I think it's important that we have a look at sovereignty and its impact on no deal, particularly given some of the hard Brexiteers appearing to demand that no sovereignty is given away in this deal. So this is a small piece from The Sun, and the second paragraph there says it's absolutely crucial that Boris stands firm on fishing. It goes right to the heart of why Brits voted for Brexit. And the penultimate paragraph there says, Boris and his negotiators have been admirably consistent from the start. A deal that is compatible with our newly won sovereignty is the only one that Britain can accept. So while industries like the pharmaceutical sector are much larger and more important to the British economy, I don't think they're as totemic to British sovereignty as fishing, with foreign boats invading British waters to steal our fish. I think it's also important to keep in mind that Michael Gove, who has a leading role in negotiations, has claimed his father's fishing firm went to the wall due to EU fisheries policies. Tory backbenchers also speak about the importance of maintaining British sovereignty in any deal, and no deal being better than a deal that compromises the UK's sovereignty. And you can see some of the comments from some Tory backbenchers there. On the other side, there are reports of France threatening to veto a deal, and some of the individual EU nation states suggesting that no deal is better than a bad deal, or any deal that's not in their nation's interests. This could be seen as political posturing to act tough and win votes at home, but it's extremely likely to restrict Michel Barnier and Ursula von der Leyen's negotiating mandate or ability to compromise. So while both sides want a deal, it may not be possible to agree a deal that satisfies both Tory backbenchers and all of the individual nations of the EU. I think the key balance of power here is that Boris doesn't actually need Tory backbenchers to get a deal agreed by the UK Parliament, because Labour have said they will support a deal, but each individual EU nation has the power to veto any deal. So this is a tweet from Elio Di Rupo, who is the Minister President of the Walloon region in Belgium. And you might remember this Parliament vetoed the CETA agreement with Canada. So Belgium's constitution requires regional approval before Belgium signs off any deal at EU Council level. So this regional parliament has the power to veto the deal, has a track record of vetoing trade deals, and has now threatened to do so. So even if a deal is agreed, there are still some hurdles that we need to jump over. And this negotiation kind of feels like trying to thread a needle without a hole at the top, keeping domestic audiences happy. I think both sides want to retain sovereignty and benefit, but in any trade deal, sovereignty is sacrificed for mutual gain. I'd say, retaliatory measures and sanctions have existed with WTO terms. They were agreed as part of the Japan trade deal, so it's not clear why they're unacceptable in an EU deal. Effectively, I think the position seems to be that we can't sign up to a deal because the EU might do something we don't like. If they were to do something the UK didn't like, the UK would then have to rip up the deal. So to preempt the EU doing something we might not like, let's just not have a deal at all to start off with. I think ultimately, I still believe whether we achieve a deal or not will come down to Boris Johnson's decision, balancing calls from his backbenchers against the interest of the country. From last night's meeting, it appears he's chosen his backbenchers, but with or without a deal, I think we'll face a cliff edge on the 1st of January, and Boris Johnson is likely to be blamed for that and forced out as Prime Minister by his party, unless he can shift that blame to Brussels. And not agreeing a deal would make it easier to blame Brussels for our economic woes next year. But Boris will also be thinking about his legacy. So in summary, the decision appears to be up to Boris Johnson, but I would say all signs currently point towards no deal, unfortunately. And some of that reality is starting to become clear. So these are some recent headlines in the news. I should say not all of these are solely down to Brexit. Some of them are down to COVID, but the 1st of January is teeing up to be a perfect storm. And you'll see in the bottom right there that Number 10 is supposedly setting up this no-deal Brexit nightmare scenario squads to deal with a no-deal Brexit and COVID simultaneously. But a number of these stories are around delays to production, investment decisions, Britain's being barred from entering the EU on January the 1st due to COVID restrictions and no longer having the right to free movement. And also, you'll remember the lorry queues that we saw a couple of weeks ago during a test and a trial. I think we've heard since that the drivers of those lorries, the hauliers, are paid by the distance rather than the time it takes them to deliver anything. So we may see a number of European drivers reluctant to come to the UK and not be paid to sit in a queue for hours in Kent, but we'll have to see what some of those exact implications actually are, and I think there'll be a lot more unexpected consequences following the 1st of January that will need to be resolved fairly quickly. So moving on, and this is the slide that has been out extremely recently. In the last hour, the EU has published some no-deal guidance. Specifically, this focuses on 4 areas: aviation, connectivity and safety, road transport connectivity, and the Channel Tunnel railway connection, along with fishing activities. So a lot of this is just maintaining transport links between the UK and the EU. The fishing activities proposal is that they would maintain fishing access to as it is for a year, so EU boats will continue to fish in UK waters and vice versa. That doesn't sound like it would be very acceptable to the UK. I think we also haven't looked at this in detail yet, but understand that a number of these measures are dependent on the UK maintaining a level playing field with the EU, and that they will be time limited in any case, and hopefully won't be needed until some kind of deal is agreed. So I think there'll be a lot of fallout, and even these no deal mitigations may not be agreed, but we'll see. But there's nothing in there on customs, trade or regulation, which I think we're particularly disappointed about. In particular, I think we were not optimistic, but hopeful that the EU might bring in some derogation or mitigation measures around batch testing to allow medicines to move more easily into Europe from the 1st of January. But that doesn't look like it's going to be the case, unfortunately. And our final slide, moving on to UK guidance for business, we've showed a version of this slide before, but I think just to run through some of the guidance that if you haven't looked at already, you really must. Firstly, the MHRA end of transition guidance. This is all around obviously medicines regulation and a lot of relevance to Northern Ireland. The border operating model and some of the letters on new trade arrangements from Steve Oldfield. The Article 41 guidance, so hopefully this won't be as necessary, but this is about placing goods on the market, if goods are placed on the market before the 31st of December, they can continue to trade in the EU and UK territories after it. But with the potential timed phased approach in Northern Ireland, this is less critical and we have a bit more time. If you are moving goods in and out of Northern Ireland, make sure you sign up to the Trader Support Service. Make sure, I think, if you're especially working on clinical trials or the moving of personal data between Europe and the UK, have a look at the Information Commissioner's Office, because the UK has said that it will continue to allow data to transfer to the EU, but it looks like the EU is not going to grant a data adequacy agreement to the UK, which would mean that there will be extra restrictions and bureaucracy if you do want to move personal data from the EU to the UK. And also booking emergency freight capacity. So this should be available from the 1st of January. And if you think you will need it, it is open to medical products. Again, guidance to check soon. I think I mentioned batch testing. So that this is something to look at now for moving goods from the UK to Europe. If you're moving goods from Europe to the UK, there is a derogation for 2 years until the 1st of January 2023. I think there is still time for some kind of agreement, and we are going to be pushing over the coming weeks and even into next year for the agreement of a mutual recognition agreement and mutual recognition of batch testing. But I think we are approaching the point where companies need to seriously start preparing for a duplicative batch testing in the UK. And then some of the guidance we're still waiting for, but hopefully should be published today or in the coming days. So issues around the Northern Ireland Protocol, around the continuity of supply in Northern Ireland, and Article 40, which is the definition of goods on the market. But as I've said, given Article 41 is less important, when this is agreed, hopefully we'll have a year to adapt to whatever the new arrangement may be anyway, which gives us more time. But also urge you to look at the government's Check, Change, Go campaign and visit their website, gov.uk/transition. As Steve mentioned, we have links available to all of this guidance on our BIABrexit.org website. And we'd really urge you to take a look at the DHSC Exchange platform. It's invite only, but please do email me and I can get you access to it. It includes all of the guidance relevant to the pharmaceutical sector and medical product suppliers, including webinars and previous bulletins and other information. So it's a great repository for anything you might need. And that's everything we have.
Thanks, Tim. Thank you for staying completely on top of it. And I'm keen, if anybody's got questions or comments, do please pop them in the questions or in the chat, in the questions box, or in the chat. Put questions, please, if you can. I suppose my summary of this is, obviously we're at the last knockings before the end of transition. I think we've seen in the last month that the default position, if things are needed, is that there's some sort of emergency sticking plaster, kick it down the road for a little bit, whether that be the Northern Ireland thinking or some of the stuff we've seen this morning about fisheries. So my guess, it's only a guess, is that that's where some of the thornier or knottier issues, if they aren't resolved by the end of the year, will end up, which is just keep going. And we keep going, but it's not looking great. I think the other thing that we're thinking about is when we update you next. We're probably thinking that it's worth doing one of these next week. We don't know what's happening, but we're thinking probably before Christmas makes sense. So maybe this time next week we'll look to do this again. If there's any movement, we'll be able to update you. The other thing that might be useful from our perspective is what's really helpful or needed by you and when. Because obviously we're limited in time and capability. We're ending into what is going to be an unusual holiday period. I doubt that everybody will want a daily update on Boxing Day and the day after, but if there is a desire, obviously we're looking to work out how we operate in the Christmas to New Year period as well. So advice from you on that. And we're probably going to need to get everybody together to think through some of the implications of the other side of this and the long-term impacts. I imagine there will be a short-term impact to continue going with negotiations on some of the things that will need to be sorted if they've been sort of kicked into the long grass for 6 months. So some of this will continue, I think, into the new year. but there may also be elements of novelty which will make sense to have some discussions about. For instance, if there's clear opportunity for divergence with European law going in one direction and UK law going in another direction, how do we handle that? How do we handle that? And how do we make sure that that happens by design rather than by accident? Or if it is happening by accident, how do we make sure that the mitigations are put in place for that? Or how do we manage that as a sector? So I'm starting to think through the other side of this, and we'll be looking for expert engagement, as I know you all have down the years as we go forward. So I think with that, Sana Ali says the uncertainty about batch testing and the deadline of January 2023, yeah, absolutely on our list. That's a UK controlled position, and I think once there's clarity as to whether there's deal or no deal, we'll continue to explain the practical challenge of delivering something like that on the speed that they're looking to, and the opportunity and the fact that they moved around on that in a month in September is also interesting. So I think that is certainly one that we will revisit.
I think just on that, I mean, we haven't seen any deal if there is going to be one yet, but there was a pharmaceutical annex proposed to that deal by the UK, which includes mutual recognition of batch testing. I think if we are to see a deal, it's likely to be a skinny deal, and we're not sure whether any annexes would be included in it. But so there is some slim hope that it still will be there, but obviously that is a slim hope it will be in any deal, and then there's slim hope that there will actually be a deal at all. So it's all compounding itself, really.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, a question on science and innovation and research. Again, not hearing anything positive much in those signs, but again, I think much of this may be we need to pick up and regroup once either no deal is declared or a deal is declared, and work out what the best way forward is from a third country position. There's good reasons why we've been in the position we've been in for 4 years on this stuff.
And I think that the question on country of origin requirements, I think, is really interesting but difficult to answer, and will my understanding is that it will only be relevant if a deal actually is agreed, and will have huge implications for sort of goods at risk on the market, or goods on the market, or goods at risk of moving into the Republic of Ireland, moving from the UK to Northern Ireland. But it's difficult to know the details of all these things, given we don't actually have a deal yet, and we don't know the exact detail of the withdrawal agreement itself. But it might be something that we can explore bringing back to the next webinar next week, to look at some of those sort of nitty-gritty legal implications, and see if we can potentially find an expert speaker to go through them as well.
I think the good thing, though, just to close, as we are, is we must keep front and centre the fact that the UK life science sector is a fantastic, globally relevant, globally leading in many places ecosystem with fantastic skills, able to develop and move science and products rapidly through development and into making a real difference for patients. That's been exemplified very excellently by the development, some of the clinical trialing, the recovery trial, the work that's gone on in the COVID pandemic. That will continue, and we should be very proud of the work that's being done in our sector. I'm sorry that I'm bringing you lots of additional distraction and burden and things that probably you'd rather not be doing. You'd rather be getting on with R&D. That's what we all want to be doing, but we're trying to provide for you the best possible info that we can. So be confident, be proud of what you're doing, and we'll continue to partner with you on some of these more challenging aspects. With that, thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as I said, please do get into contact with me if you want access to the Exchange platform, or if there's anything specific you want us to raise with ministers, or raise in a potential webinar next week on Thursday. And I think with that, we'll close the webinar. So thank you everybody so much.